Chris, I hope you're having a great college football season. Welcome back to T-Town, my friend.
Ryan, thanks, man. I appreciate you having me. It's always good to catch up.
Yeah, it is. It is. And maybe I could just ask you in a roundabout way, maybe your biggest takeaway from the first 6 weeks at the midpoint of college football season. What has been your big takeaway?
You know, it's funny you should ask that. I was discussing just that with one of your old buddies, Mick Gillespie.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, sure.
And there's really about 6 teams, at least 6, that you could point to right now, Ryan, that I think you can make a legitimate case or claim has a chance to win it all. And that's a little bit different from the last few years. I think it was Clemson and Alabama and then sort of everybody else. But as you look at, and I've seen Alabama live this year. I've seen Clemson live. I've seen Ohio State live. I had a chance to go to Oklahoma in the preseason and watch the Sooners practice. So I've seen a lot of these teams up close. I think there's, that to me means there should be some pretty good drama the second half of the season. And all of those teams have some warts, but all of them have things they do really, really well too. And the thing that I always look at, Ryan, when I start trying to assess a football team is the first 2 things I look at is quarterback, who truly has a difference maker at quarterback, and defensive line. And that combination, 10, 15 years, it almost always, the team that's winning it, or certainly the team that has a chance to win it, is really good at both of those positions. And I think when you look at all these teams we've talked about, a lot of them have good quarterbacks. A lot of them have really good defensive lines. Right now, who's got the best combination of defensive line quarterback that I've seen, and this may change 2 weeks from now, it might be Ohio State. Now, has Ohio State played the schedule that everybody else has? I don't know. But the Justin Fields / combo, Chase Young and Devon Hamilton, those cats at Ohio State look pretty good. I think that, to me, makes what should be a really, really entertaining stretch run. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see who comes out and what 4 teams ultimately make it to the playoff. Because in the SEC, there's a decent chance that the teams in the SEC may beat up on each other because they still sort of have that round robin to play, a lot of the teams, and you got to get through the SEC championship game. That, to me, is probably my biggest takeaway midway through the year.
When you look at the University of Alabama, I'm curious what you see in Alabama's football team here in 2019.
That you're going to have to score 40 or more to beat them. I mean, they are so good at throwing the football. And as one coach told me, we were talking about the best teams in college football, and he said, I know there's been some angst in and around the Alabama program about them not running it better. And part of that is, let's be honest, Ryan, those of us who watch Bama play for a long time, you're just used to them, as I like to say, blooding your nose on offense around the football. So we're not used to seeing them throw the football this much. But you know what? When you got 4 receivers, they're all going to be first or second round draft picks, and the guy throwing the football is going to be the first or second pick in the draft next year. Why not play that way? Nick Saban, it wasn't like he was born yesterday. He's not going to try to jam a square peg into a round hole, but they are just dynamite offensively. And I don't know that I've seen anybody in college football that's going to really be able to shut that passing game down, because all 4 of them, as good as they are at separating and making big plays down the field, they're all great after the catch. And Tua, the most amazing thing to me about Tua, Ryan, is I've had a chance to stand there and talk to him on many occasions, just me and him. And I'm about 5'11". Tua's probably about an inch taller than me, 6 foot. But, man, he can see the field like he's 6'7". He can see throwing alleys. He can see throwing windows. He can see over. It's amazing the way he sees everything on the field and the way he can spread the ball around the football field at that size.
Chris, we're having a lot of great conversations, and defensively this team has still got some work to do. Can you kind of give me your perspective on the defensive side of the football here in Tuscaloosa?
Well, they're just not as good as they've been. Let's face it. There's no other way to say it. And a lot of that's injuries. When I was visiting with Coach Saban and some of the staff in the preseason, they made it very clear to me that linebacker was the area they could just not afford to have injuries. Well, they didn't just have injuries at linebacker. Their best linebacker, Dylan Moses, goes down. And that Alabama defense without him there in the middle is drastically different. I mean, he's a guy that, he cleaned things up. He was a finisher for them on defense. He made everybody else around it better. They don't have that kind of guy there in the middle at linebacker anymore. And that, to me, is the biggest difference. And then, let's face it, early defections in the NFL the last couple of years have taken their toll, even as well as Alabama has recruited. They haven't tackled as well at times this year as they have in the past. They haven't stopped the run nearly as well. When you lose a Quentin Williams and when Dylan Moses gets hurt, I mean, those things, even in Alabama, even when you recruit the way Clemson and Alabama and Ohio State, when you lose difference makers like that over the course of a year or two, whether it's injuries related to the NFL, it shows up. And I think it's shown up this year at Bama. Now, that doesn't mean Bama is deficient or not very good at defense. On defense, trust me, there's a lot of schools around the country that would take that defense. They're just not as dominant as we're used to seeing Alabama be on defense, which, again, the thing I think they've done very well over the years, as well as anybody, is they played complementary football. And this team is equipped, whereas 4, 5, 6 years ago, they probably weren't as equipped. Certainly not back in that 11 team and maybe even 12, but they weren't as equipped to just win scoring shootouts, scoring matchups. This team is, Ryan. They could win, and I think they're comfortable winning a 41-38, 45-41 type of game, whereas that really wasn't the case, 6, 7, 8 years ago.
We're talking to Chris Lowe, ESPN college football analyst. Chris, you were part of a panel earlier this week, and it was something that grabbed our attention because you have to respect what Tua has been able to accomplish, but you also have to look at what's happening in Baton Rouge. And we have noticed that Joe Burrow has sort of taken the lead in the Heisman article that you guys published there, a straw poll that includes 10 analysts. You're a part of those 10 analysts. When you look at this Heisman, how do you handicap this sort of this race with Tua and Joe Burrow? Certainly there's more people involved than these two, but in our area, this has been the heavy conversation here.
Well, I think the cool thing is there is a race. There's not one player or two players they're just head and shoulders above everybody else. And as you know, Ryan, the Heisman race, much like the college football playoff race, can take a pretty drastic turn in a week or two. I mean, who was the guy that was everybody's favorite to start the season? Trevor Lawrence. I mean, you don't even really hear his name in the Heisman conversation. So both of them have played lights out. And I think I put it out there on social media earlier this week. What are they combined for? 52 touchdowns and 4 interceptions or something like that? Burrow and Tua?
A bunch,
that's
yes.
Incredible.
It is crazy.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, the rest of the West as a team have combined for 48 touchdowns and 20 interceptions. They're on a different planet right now, Burrow and Tua. They both are surrounded by great receiving corps. Their schemes and the way that that they're using those two quarterbacks. I don't know. I mean, if you ask me right now, if I had, fortunately I have to vote right now, okay? And I am a Heisman voter. Who would I vote for? Probably Burrow, because he's probably played better teams to this point. But the beauty of it is they're going to play each other here in a couple weeks. We're going to see LSU and Alabama go at it. And that's probably going to be the game that one way or the other separates who's going to be the guy, if it is indeed one of those two. One of those teams are going to play probably in the SEC championship game, which will have a big say. LSU still has to play Auburn, whose defense I think is the best in the league. Alabama still has to play Auburn. So I guess what I'm saying, Ryan, is there's still going to be a lot of tests for both of those guys, and there's a lot of football left to be played where we get a chance to see who truly is. I've had a lot of fun watching them both play, and it's different stories. Tua's been at Alabama the whole time. Burrow transfers into LSU from Ohio State, and if you would have told me 3 years ago that LSU would be playing like this on offense and lighting people up, throwing football all over the field, playing fast and going fast and running tempo. I mean, heck, if you'd have told me Alabama would be playing like this 5, 6, 7 years ago, you wouldn't have believed it. None of us would.
Sure.
But the game has changed. It's evolved. And to Ed Ogeron's credit, to Nick Saban's credit, they've changed with it.
Well, and you look at Nick Saban, I think it's one of the things that we often overlook that he has been able to evolve. We go back and we study great college coaches, whether it's Coach Bryant or maybe you look at different coaches there in the Tennessee history. They've all adapted to the game. And I think that's where Nick Saban, I think if we write this history book 20 years from now, I think we'll look back at this change. And I give Lane Kiffin a ton of credit, even though he will not allow me to give him credit here. He was probably opened the door of that offensive direction here in T-Town.
Yeah, and Lane did a lot of fighting with Nick.
Well, now he didn't tell that story. He didn't tell that part.
Well, when I say fighting, I mean figuratively.
Yeah, right.
About what the way they were going to play, the way he wanted to play, and to Nick's credit, Nick is receptive to change, and he's old school, and he can be stubborn, and he can be a bear, but he also understands that the game changes, and if you don't change with it, you get left behind. Now, there's some principles and some tenets of the game that Nick's never going to want to change, that he's just going to hold firm to. But, remember the days when he's talking about playing fast? He called them fastball guys.
Sure.
Was that good for the game? Well, spreading it out and going fast and running a bunch of plays. Well, Alabama plays like that now because he understands that that's a huge advantage for the offense and having four receivers, spreading around, throwing the football. But you're 100% right. Lane did help part of that. And let's give Nick a lot of credit, too. I mean, Nick hasn't been afraid to bring in people, especially on offense, who maybe don't think exactly the way he does, that have challenged him. Lane Kiffin, Sarkisian. Listen, Nick wasn't the happiest camper in the world that Sark left to go be the OC at the Falcons. But when he had a chance to get him back, he knew that Sark would come in and help broaden that offense, broaden the passing game, in which he's done that. And he sees ways to improve. He's always looking for ways to improve. I don't care how many championships the guy wins. So you're 100% right. And he's been able to evolve. He's been able to do things differently with the way the game has evolved and changed. But again, I can tell you, having been around him now for a long time, there's something that he's never going to waver on, and that's being tough and physical, being disciplined, and doing things exactly the same way, no matter who you play or when you play, or what supposedly, quote unquote, the stakes are in that particular game.
Chris, I'd love to ask you, as we preserve the third Saturday of October, you've lived in that state, you understand, you've been a part of this rivalry, we've covered it from a lot of different angles. We are doing our best to try to help us appreciate this third Saturday of October. It is a special rivalry, and I said it earlier, and I was describing stories, and Jacob produces the program Across the Glass, and I'm trying to explain how great Tennessee was, and Jason Witten and Peyton Manning beating up on Alabama, the celebration anytime you could break the streak. I'm curious, from your side of the fence, can you share us one of your favorite memories of this Alabama-Tennessee rivalry?
Well, I mean, just generally, it's been such a cyclical rivalry. Certainly over the last, 30 years. You're right. It hasn't been much of a rivalry on the field the last decade, really since Nick's gotten here. I mean, gosh, the last time Tennessee won in Tuscaloosa was 2003.
Ooh, wow.
To put that in perspective, Ryan, our good buddy Mick Gillespie had an afro back in 2000. That's how long it's been.
Yes, it has been. Yes, it has been. Yes,
you be sure, if he's not listening, you be sure that
well, now he generally makes his drive down because he does our pre- and post-game show here on Tide.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I know he's headed that way, but that to me is, gosh, that's been a long time. And yet you're right. Back when Manning and T. Martin, that whole crowd was there for Tennessee, I think Tennessee won, 9, 10 straight years. If you brought somebody in from Mars right now and told them that at one point Tennessee won that many games in a row over Alabama, they look at you like you're crazy. It's been such a cyclical rivalry, and you go back to when Coach Bryant was there, and they dominated Tennessee in the 70s and the early 80s, and then Coach Majors turned around in the 80s, and Tennessee won a bunch in a row. But I don't know. Two moments to me stand out. I'll give you two different perspectives. I'll start, since you guys are based in Alabama, I'll start with Alabama. The moment from an Alabama perspective in this rivalry that stands out to me was 1990 in Knoxville, when Tennessee had a unbelievably talented football team. I mean, just brimming with NFL talent. and I think actually shared the SEC title that year. Alabama comes to town, big underdog, not expected to do much, hangs around in that game. Tennessee lines up to kick a field goal, a long field goal that would have won it. Bama blocks it. It sounds like a cannon. I can still hear the block. It sounded like a cannon went off the stadium. That's how loud the thud was. And the ball squirts about 30 yards the other way. Bama recovers, and Doyle kicks one from 47 to win it. That probably would have been good from 67. He absolutely drilled it. I think that from an Alabama perspective, that's the one. From the Tennessee's perspective, it's probably 85 when Tennessee won there in Legion Field. Tennessee won the SEC championship that year. Dale Jones deflecting the interception, or Mike Shula's pass and sort of cradling it for the interception, the signature play of that game, and Tennessee winning despite Tony Robinson, their quarterback, going down. But those are two plays, for an old head like me, and I know that's not in the last 10 years, one in 1990 and one in 1985, but two plays when I think about that rivalry that have endured for me.
Coach Stallings mentioned that 1990 game because I think he started out. It was not a good record, and a lot of people were having doubts about him. So that was brought up quite a bit in 1990. Hey, Chris, thank you again. I know we're up against a couple of minutes here, but I really appreciate you, and I hope our paths cross very, very soon. We haven't really had a lot of quality games that involve the University of Alabama, but something tells me coming up the first couple of weeks in November, I think I'll see you inside Bryant-Denny Stadium. At least I hope I will.
Yeah. You bet, man. It's going to be a fun close of the season.
Oh, it is.
You're right about that.
It is good.
Take care, Ryan.
Thank you, Chris. I hope you have a great day.